All right. Well, it's good to see you. I haven't seen you in weeks
I
and weeks, right?
know. I know. I really miss coming to the gym. It's making me sad.
Well, hopefully, we get our stuff together as a state and cases
Nah.
start declining, because
Uh,
it's been such a, and we're, back to school's happening. I thought that's something we could, I'm sure, talk about. And
yeah.
anyway, but
Yeah.
yeah, so that's great. I'm so that, but segue on that is I'm glad that you are in kind of a rural area, but you're sitting here able to do a Zoom meeting. That's awesome.
Yeah. It's kind of funny because it took us a while to figure this out. But if you go a mile that way, you'll lose internet. If you go a mile back this way, you use internet or not internet because I don't have internet connection. I'm on a hotspot
Yeah.
basically through my phone. But you'll lose cell coverage like in either direction. So I mean, so when we first moved out here, we used to notice that people would pull up to the side of the road by our house and then just sit there. And we would always be like, where are these people sitting? Well, finally, one day I just asked them, it's because there's cell coverage. And so people who
Oh,
live
okay.
three-fourths of a mile from me will come up here to make a phone call and then go back home.
Yeah.
So we're in this really sweet spot in terms of being able to get cell coverage, but we're on a data plan. So, that's one of the things about rural internet is like we have to really parcel it out because if we just use internet
Oh, yeah.
whenever we want to, we'll run out of internet by the end of by the middle of the
Oh,
month.
that's
So we
another
have to
great point.
all, there's five of us, so we have to all kind of be like, everyone gets their allocated time.
Yeah. Do you know anything about the order or legislation that is being passed to distribute throughout Arkansas for rural internet for like back to school, $10 million
I know
dollars?
that it happened. Yeah, I know that it happened, and I've been following that stuff really closely for work. I'm not at the office today, so one of my main things when I get back to work tomorrow will be to try to wrap my mind around what all the possibilities are, because that really plays into my job a lot. And I think that oh, my dogs are wrestling. I think one of the the things that I think it's positive that can come out of this moment is like the fact that we've always needed that kind of access for our population,
Yes.
and to see that the state is acting on it, I feel like is a real positive thing,
I
and I
thought
hope
that
that
was
it,
good news. I was so happy to read
yeah,
that.
yeah, because I mean, it really is like a huge, that was when we moved back here from Little Rock. That was one of the things we had to take into account was we really wanted to come back, but neither of us could do our job without access to like internet. And like I said, we're just super lucky because if our property was literally a fourth of a mile away, we wouldn't
Hmm.
we wouldn't be using the data plan. So it's really needed out here. It really, really is. So I'm hoping that one good thing can come out of this is helping people understand how necessary that is
Yeah.
for people out here.
Yeah, I've had the silliest problem with my podcast. I'm in my new studio and I got
Yeah.
this hardwired Ethernet, right? I
Uh-huh.
have it here. It's right. But this is not the right
Uh-huh.
one.
Oh no.
It's
Oh
like
no.
that they made, they don't really put the Ethernet port in laptops anymore. I got a new MacBook Pro for
Uh-huh.
work and for this and for the gym and for the studio.
Yeah.
And I've been having the silliest little problems like that because there's some conversions that have been made I'm just not hip on.
I
So
understand that.
yeah, I mean, yeah, but just like this Zoom platform we're podcasting on,
Mhm.
that was a great leap forward for society. I feel like everybody, the joke is now it could have been a Zoom meeting,
Yeah.
versus it could have been an email.
Right.
Yeah. So, well, you mentioned your job.
Mhm.
I kind of want to talk with you about a little bit of everything today, a little bit of how you got into folklore, where you've been,
Okay.
just because I know that you just haven't been in the area. I feel like you're just back in the area, kind of a
Yeah.
little bit about your experiences. But also about one thing I will say about you is I feel like you're a very community oriented person. And
Oh, thanks.
I feel like I see that kind of play into your job. I see that play into your philanthropic work. What is it exactly you do with your job? We've never really talked about it in detail.
Yeah. Well, it used to be called the Literacy Council, so a lot of people know it by that name. Um, we changed the name a while back just to reflect that we do more than just literacy. So it's called the River Valley Adult Learning Alliance. So we serve 5 counties: Pope, Yell, Johnson, Franklin, and Logan. So
Mhm.
5 predominantly rural counties. Um, so what we do is we work with adults 18 and over for pretty much any kind of self-identified adult learning that they might want to do. So what that looks like in most cases is getting a GED, taking a citizenship test, or taking other kinds of like tests for work, certification, things like that. So we work with a lot of people wanting to get their GED and then people wanting to learn English. So a lot of conversational English as well. So we have a lot of ESL students that's English as a second language who
Yeah.
speak English but maybe want to improve their English skills. So we'll set them up with a conversation partner. We also have some students who don't really speak much English at all and start from the beginning. Learning English, and then most recently, what that's meant is, and we're right now we're trying to pivot to do this more is what we call family literacy. So my funding comes from the state, so I can't work with people under 18. Can work with people under 16 if they're dropped out of school, but if they're enrolled in public school, then have to be 18. However, what we can do is what's called family literacy, which is we help the adult help the child. So right now with AMI packets, with people doing
Yeah.
virtual school, that's a huge thing. Um, and so even for people who have, I tell people this all the time, like I have a master's degree and you would think I would always be able to help my kids with my homework, but that's not always the case. Like sometimes I may understand. Sorry, my dog.
If
Desto,
my
you got my
if my
dog.
dog was here, he would be right here.
I have this sweet. His body is full grown now, but he's still kind of a puppy, and he's a little
Have
awkward.
you, Cora and
Um,
I have giant dogs, so you don't. It's totally fine. I think it's hilarious when I'll
okay.
podcast at the house and the dog comes up and he's like, "Hey, I'm on the podcast too."
I know he would just. He's an Australian Shepherd, and he is huge too, and he's
Oh,
such a goofball, and I love him so much. Um, but yeah, so we try to help parents help our caregivers. It might be a grandparent, whoever's helping with the child, help them help the child, and so we've done a partnership with the Yale County Junior Auxiliary ladies to where they're going to be volunteer tutors for us, and so we'll be working closely with the schools. Right now, we're really in communication with Dardanelle School, but we want to
mhm.
branch that out to the other schools as well, and just kind of be that support system for caregivers as they're trying to make sense of virtual schooling, of if the schools have to close and they have to do AMI packets, trying to make sense of. And I think a lot of that is just providing a support system because it's hard and it's stressful to try to take on that. I mean, teachers are highly skilled, trained
Yeah.
people. And for us to suddenly, kind of try to take on that role that they've been studying to do for years and years and have all this hands on practice, it's difficult. And I think, one thing I always try to say is like, one of the reasons we should respect and honor our teachers more is because clearly they are highly trained people who know what they're doing. And so I think, we just trying to provide that support. Hold on. Ryan, can you get Desto?
Desto, I like that.
His name is short for this incandesto, which came from a book that me and the kids read. And so, but hey, Brian, I'm gonna just a second. I'm so
Sidebar,
sorry.
Brian has also been on the podcast.
Everything is always a little nuts around here. Okay.
Hey, there's
Brian,
little kids training on the other side of this wall in my
okay.
studio. You know, it's so if you hear some music thumping, Corey yelling at people, that's what's going on.
That's what's going on.
You know, you
uh,
bring up something that I'm going to tell you I didn't even think about. I mean, I know. So I was homeschooled till eighth grade, so my parents kind of undertook all of the subjects and trying to, you know, educate me until that time. But that's something with like ESL I had not thought about. These kids are going to need help at home, and their parents may not be able to disseminate what's coming home with them. Is that kind of what you were hitting on?
Yeah, I mean, not just ESL students, really anyone, but yeah, I mean, the language barrier is a big deal because a lot of times, people who work in the schools know this. A lot of children translate for their families,
Yes.
which I think is something that's kind of under recognized in our community. And I always say that I think we ought to start a scholarship for kids coming out of our schools because a lot of these kids are fluently translating by the time they're in fifth grade, which is like a highly specialized skill that people work for years to do. And these kids are just doing it because it's, survival tactic. And I think we should honor that. So, but yeah, so the kids are having schoolwork come home and the parents may not necessarily, the parents may know how to do the math, but not necessarily how to explain it in English when the directions are in English. And so, yeah, that's one of the things that we're trying to help with is Yamira is the AmeriCorps worker who works with us. She's really amazing, and she does a lot of our ESL work. I'm learning to speak Spanish, but I'm not able to. I'm not fluent yet, so I can't help as much as I'd like. And so yeah, and then also for English speaking families, we have a lot of parents, and like I said, for me, I know this happens for me. My kids are going into fifth grade, like fourth grade math. I understood how to do it, but like how to explain it the way they were taught in their class, I learned it differently.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a comment I hear parents making all the time.
yes. And this is not a popular opinion for a lot of people, but I actually kind of love the way they're teaching math now because I really struggled with math. And I don't mean like I wasn't kind of good at it. I mean like I really struggled with
Me
it.
too. That I was
Um,
thinking when you were talking a second ago, I was like, I can't do the math. Like that's
yeah.
anyway. Yeah, it's
Yeah, you get me to college or you get me to like basic algebra and I am lost.
past
And
algebra one, past y equals mx plus b. I'm out of there.
same. But I love the way they're teaching it now because they're teaching it kind of more like whole systems. So you really comprehend, like I'll probably butcher this. I'm not a educator, but like for example, like they're teaching kids to think about like the number 10 is also two fives, which we know that eventually, but we weren't really necessarily taught that. You had to kind of like grasp that on your own to some degree over time. And I just never was able to think in those more abstract terms about math. And I feel like well, they're not even abstract, they're more concrete. If I'd have been given that kind of learning, I feel like I wouldn't have struggled as much as I did. So I actually kind of love the way they're teaching math now. I know some parents hate it, but it's actually like doing the math with my kids. I'm learning a lot. And I tell my kids that all the time. I'm like, this is actually helpful for me because really struggled. I mean, I had a scholarship to go to UCA undergrad, but my math scores on the ACT were so low. I had to go to remedial math classes in college, even though I landed a scholarship because my other categories were so high. So I mean, I like really struggled, and it's been something that's been hard my whole life. And I feel like I'm kind of getting a chance to relearn it, and it's kind of fun. Kind of fun. I mean, I don't like it, you know what I mean? But
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
fun.
I know what you're saying, and I got pushed into the same thing, remedial math. But I will tell you how I weaseled out of it as in a side story. So it was Dr. Lim Paris was the department head of mathematics. I believe he's since retired. But I took logic, right? And two, I think that kind of what I've seen with some math, I would describe as a logic game, right?
Mm,
With some of which I've always liked logic more, and I feel like logic and math are just. But
mhm,
I made an A in logic, which is a
mm.
pre-cal credit at U of A. So I go in and I'm like, Dr. Lim Paris. I'm a senior, I really just would like to take college mathematics was a course they offered that would satisfy your college algebra credit. And I
Uh-huh.
was like, and by the way, I made an A in logic with Dr. Bush. At U of A, that's a pre-cal credit. I'm not saying that, and he just was like, I'm going to override
Nice.
it. He
Nice.
put he put me in, and I ended up making an A or a B in that college algebra or college mathematics class. But like what you're saying, I think it is so valuable. I was a little older. I was probably 25 then. I think it's valuable to come back to that stuff as an adult. I think it'll keep our minds stimulated. And I told one of the teens here yesterday that because she said that she has not stopped doing school since the like all summer and everything, and like her parents have like shifted to homeschool, and
Oh,
they're
well.
very capable to do that. And I was like, I think I've learned more since I've been out of college than maybe my whole life, because I
Mhm,
finally figured out how to learn and how to set up. Like you're saying, oh,
mhm,
I'm just learning Spanish. No big deal.
mhm.
I mean, it is a big deal. I'm sure it's probably frustrating too, is what I was thinking when you were saying that. But
Yeah.
but we are now, I think, on the other side of our education. That's what I learned is how to learn, how to set up
Mhm. Yeah.
processes for myself, and teaching. Oh man, that has
Oh,
got me learning more than anything, whether it's martial arts, but particularly history. You know.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's something we try to talk about when I do, community speaking things for my job is, I think there's this real misconception, and I think it's really prevalent around here, is that you go to college, or I mean, you go to high school. If you graduate, that's great. And then, maybe you go to college, maybe you don't, but like, and then you kind of go on and do life or whatever. But the reality is like we are always learning. Like we are never stop learning. And that does has nothing to do with whether we go to college or not. Like people who are really good at their jobs, whether it be construction or working at the bank, whatever it is, like we're always learning. And so I think there's this thing with where I work, we try to tell people is like just because you don't understand it doesn't make you unintelligent. It doesn't make you like there's nothing wrong with you. It's like we're all always learning, and so we really want to take that kind of like shame away from families and be like, it's no big deal that you don't know how to do this and help your kids. I don't either. Let's figure it out together. And because I think there's just this real idea that if you don't already know it, you can't know it, and that's not true at all. And so and just kind of highlight that people are always learning. I mean, we tend to think of like what you learn in school as being like the highest form of learning, but people who didn't finish high school, I work with people all the time who didn't finish high school, and they're incredibly intelligent people, and they have like tons of job skills, and they can do things I couldn't even imagine. They just don't have the piece of paper. Big deal. So let's help you get the piece of paper so you can go on and get that next level of what you're wanting to do. So yeah, I feel really strongly about that. And I was the first person in my family to go to college, and it was a really big deal, and I'm proud of that accomplishment. But at the same time, I think there are a lot of people out there that don't make that choice or can't make that choice, and that has nothing to do with their intelligence level. Like we're all always learning, you know.
Yes, yes, that is so true. It's just been a steady uphill climb for me, right? And it's less, I guess I finally got in shape. It's less of a strenuous activity, and I get frustrated less. I just started taking guitar lessons, but I played
Uh-huh.
guitar for like 20 years. I was
Yeah.
doing the math on that, and I was like, whoa, it's been pretty almost 20 years, like 18 and a half years. But, you know, I have like learned a ton already. It's insane. And one full lesson, and then like he sent me some resources like Word documents and stuff. But my capacity to learn was there, and then to associate with everything else I'd learned on the guitar. And I just kept thinking while I was learning new things, and it was blowing my mind. I was like, oh, I go through this with martial arts. I go through this with history. Like it's a constant recontextual, like I'm
Mhm.
just going through it all the time, recontextualizing things,
Yes, totally. Yeah, totally.
which is awesome. I think that's gonna. I have no science behind this, but I think this is gonna keep us keep our minds healthy longer. I would like to
I
think that we will
I
stay
hope so.
plugged in and pass in our sleep some night when we're in our 90s or hundreds
I hope so. That'd be the way
with
to go.
all of our mental faculties there
Yes.
and no pain. Oh man. Well, would you, without sharing any names, could you share some like success stories you've seen since? How long have you been working there?
It'll be 2 years next month. 2 years next month.
What have been some moving things that you've seen and been a part of on the job?
Yeah. Oh, I love that question. Well, yeah, I can't name names, but I will tell you this story about this one guy who he had been working toward his GED for at least a year or two before I came on. And I don't work, unfortunately, I don't get to work directly with the students. As my job is actually part time. And so, as the director, I kind of manage the tutors and I do a lot of paperwork. So, like, I meet the students, but I don't get to do a lot of the tutoring. So, but I'm in constant communication with everyone. And so, his tutor had told me, that she'd been working with him for a long time. And there kind of became a point where she was like, I'm not giving up. I want to keep working with him, but I just don't know if he's going to pass the GD because it was like 3 years in. And so we work really closely with Adult Ed, which is the institution and organization that gives the main classes for GED. And I should back up and say we don't give the testing, but what a lot of people don't realize about the GED is that the group classes that adult education offers, the state offers, is you have to be at a fifth grade reading level to take those classes. If you are not at a fifth grade reading level, those classes are just not useful to you. So we work with a lot of people that come in, they want to take the GED, but they are not at a fifth grade reading level. So they come work with us until they get ready to go into the group classes. So anyway, he was one of these students. But to make a very long story short, um, it's been about 7 months ago, he finally passed the last subject area of his GED. And it took him almost 5 years. But he did not give up. And I have just and he had health problems throughout it, and he just never gave up. And I have so much respect for him because, there was I think a lot of people would have quit, and he didn't. I've also seen, we serve a lot of immigrant families, and so I've seen where people will come in and like we had a couple that came in and they were wanting to learn English, but one of them also didn't read in Spanish. So they both fluent speaking in Spanish, but one of them was unable to also read in Spanish as well. So how do you teach someone to read in English who also doesn't read in their first language? So we had to kind of back up, and this person is learning to read in Spanish and then also starting to learn to read and speak in English. So that's been really powerful. We had a student who is, sometimes we get students who work with us through kind of court, not exactly court mandated, but it's been recommended by the court. And this was a English language learner. And there was some custody issues. And to make a very long story short, she was able to go to the store and use her child's school supply list and get school supplies and use the one in English for the first time ever. So she was like, I got to go shopping and with my child, and my child did not have to translate for me. I read the whole list.
Wow,
And those
that's great.
Yeah, I know, right? And so, and people feel rightfully so, they've worked so hard for it. And so, um, yeah, and then I'll tell you one more story. This is one of my favorite ones too, is we had a student who wanted to get their GED. She was probably in her 60s. Um, had it, and a lot of people, this is a misconception that people have, is like, oh, if you don't have your GED or you don't read a fifth grade reading level, your life must be horrible and sad. But no, I mean, these are people who've like learned all these techniques to function in life. So this was a very successful person in her job. She had a great life. She had grandkids. She was very happy, but she wanted to pass the GED. Well, so we got her set up with a tutor. But one of the things I love about this story is her tutor is somebody who signed up to volunteer with us who had also gotten her GED. So her tutor was a person who had dropped out of high school as well, who had gone on later in her 30s and her 40s and gotten her GED, and now she volunteers with us and she tutors other people who are getting their GEDs. So I love that, and so I don't know, it's really inspiring. And having English language learners come in, that really inspires me to do better with my Spanish, because I'm like, if you can come to another country, not speak the language at all and try to navigate it, I can sit down and practice Spanish for an hour. You know what I mean? I mean, it's like,
Yes.
it's like the things that people do to survive are amazing, and people are so tough and they're so resilient, and so yeah, so I'm kind of inspired every day, and it really makes me realize like the resources and privileges I have, and reminds me like to use them wisely. You know what I mean? It's like people are out there doing amazing things, and most of the time they don't get any recognition for it. And so I'm kind of just always amazed. And yeah, I love working with I wish I could work closely with the students more than I do. A lot of it, like I said, is working with the tutors who then work with the students. So,
Yeah, and one thing I don't even know why this popped in my head other than it's a sad reality of one of the things you just said. Like, how do you address or deal with, or do you run into that negative xenophobic or racial stereotype that, well, don't come here if you don't speak the language? Like,
yeah.
I've heard that my whole life, and I just don't, I don't see that. Like, I'm like, well, that's not what I thought we were about, guys. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It blows my mind. And I know people that think that way, and it's like, I don't even know how to address it anymore.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think I think it's a lot of people feel that way. And I think, at its root, it's ignorance. I've never had a conversation with someone who had those feelings and legitimately understood what was happening. Like, when you start to ask questions around, do you understand what DACA, deferred action for childhood arrivals is? Like, people who hate DACA don't actually understand what it is. People who are like really anti-immigrant absolutely don't understand what's happening in the countries where people are coming from. You know what I mean? There's like a ton of ignorance around it. But I think the scary thing is it's it starts out as just ignorance, but then it actually creates a less safer community for people, and people are scared. And I mean, one of the things that I try to explain to people is like, it takes a lot of bravery for people to come in to ask for resources with us, because a lot of Spanish speaking people in the community know how other people feel about them, and to like come in and ask for help is scary for folks. So I think that people who want to fight that xenophobic and racist attitude, we have to be very vocal and be like, no, we want to be here, we want to support, we're all in this together. And because people are legitimately fearful. So the schools, I think, I always brag on the Dardanelle schools. Like, they have been translating, they send home everything that comes home in the Dardanelle school system is in English and Spanish.
Great.
They've been doing that for a long time. They've led the way. I've never heard anyone really talk about this at the state level, but I mean, I think people should know that the Dardanelle School District has been ahead of their time on that, for
Wow.
way ahead of the city. The city doesn't do that, but the school district does. And I'll back up and tell they're an inspirational like story that's connected to this, and I still get chills like talking about it. But I had put out a call for tutors when I first started working there. This is a big long story, but when I first started working, there was a lot of infrastructure, and I was kind of starting from scratch in a lot of ways. So put out a call, for tutors, and I said especially bilingual tutors. Well, I got this application back from this young man, and he was a pre-med student at Arkansas Tech University, and he was bilingual, and he really wanted help, and I was like, cool. So I said, come on up to the office, I'll show you around. So we have access to this. We're in a Dardanelle School District building, but we're not employed by the Dardanelle School District, but they let us use their space. And at the end of the building is this thing called the Parent Educator Resource Center. And it used to be used that way. It's not used as much that way now, but we're trying to revive that. Well, he came in, and I asked him a little bit about himself, and we talked and all this stuff. And he said he was a graduate of Dardanelle High School, and he was pre-med, and he told me a little bit about his work. And I said, cool, let me show you the room where you could use to tutor the students. I'll show you around. And he said, oh, I've been down there. That's where I learned English. And he was like in 4th grade when he learned English. He said, yeah, I've been in that room. That's where I learned to speak English. And I was like, and now he's a pre-med student.
Full
And
circle.
yeah, and he's like, and that's, and he was like, well, I'm here. I know what it's like. And, I still get chills telling, that story because, and I think, I don't know anything about like his actual story, but a lot of people who are like anti-immigrant and anti-DACA say, oh, we don't want people here. People don't realize that a lot of the people that we're graduating with honors from our local high school are DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrival. People who are given back to the community. I don't know if he's DACA. I mean, that's not the point of the story, but I'm saying that there are a lot of people who are, and and people just don't realize that, what what's happening in the community. And so, I think there's a ton of ignorance, and then it hurts. It literally like hurts the future of the community. And we have to fight that ignorance. Like we have to fight it because it's just detrimental for not just the immigrant community, but for everybody,
Hmm.
it's detrimental for the whole community. So anyway,
Um, so what can you tell me and the listeners? Because it's great that we just get to talk about all these things, because usually we're sidebarring these things for 5 minutes while we're trying to punch each other and stuff.
yes.
Which, okay, so I knew you first when I was getting my degrees. You were adjuncting, and
Mhm.
I remember one summer you taught out at Lake Point, and I filmed you, and I think that you were pregnant at that time, if I'm not mistaken.
That sounds right.
Right? And I'm
Yeah.
not sure. It may have been with the boys. I don't know. But so I've known you through that way. But with the now that you've come back in kind of full circle to the gym because you got into boxing along your
Yeah.
travels. But
Yeah.
I really, I follow along with everything that you post about, and you post about everything you're doing, kind of like myself. So
Mhm.
I feel like, like I know what you're involved in, but don't really know the specifics, So with the Mick House, like what are you doing with that? How did that get started? Where did the house come from?
Yeah.
FAQs.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, the McElroy House, it's not a very linear story. I always tell people that. Like there was a lot of twists and turns. So this is a very oversimplified version that I'm going to give you because there was a lot of stops and starts and struggles and whatever. But so the McElroy was originally my grandparents' house. I grew up staying with my grandparents and my uncle there. And to make a very long story short, when my mother passed away, which is what brought me back to Arkansas. I was in Kentucky when my mom got very ill with terminal cancer. And so, in a very long series of events, I wound up inheriting the property. And, but kind of what I didn't want to rent it. I didn't want to make a profit from it. I wanted to figure out a way to, give it back to the community, and trying to figure out like what that looks like has been a never ending process. But when I was in graduate school in Western Kentucky. I worked with a man named Michael Morrow, and he was the founder of the West Kentucky African American Heritage Museum. And he's still there. They're still doing amazing work. I'll share some videos with you. But and this is Russellville, Kentucky, not Russellville, Arkansas, which is kind of funny. About a population about 9,000 people there. And but anyway, he was from the neighborhood. He would take all these old buildings that were basically falling down or in various, stages of, needing repair, and turn them into community resource centers, and would work with the local jail to help kids get job skills, and did after school tutoring. And then one of the big things they were doing was historical research, and in the community, and particularly genealogy. And this was Black genealogy. So like black genealogical research and white genealogical research are totally different things. I mean, people, like trying to find your family's roots if you're a Black family is sometimes incredibly difficult. And so he was tracing Black genealogy, back to slavery in Russellville, which of course was highly controversial in the town, as you might imagine. And doing all this historical research. And I just learned, so much from him about how you do history in a way that benefits the community, and how you take resources and turn them into, to take things that might look like not a resource and then turn it into, like a resource for the community. And he let me kind of basically follow him around for 2 years, which is amazing. And I got to meet Mr. Neblett, who was one of the first SNCC freedom singers from the 60s, who was highly involved in the civil rights movement. I got to meet everybody in the community, and so when I came back to Arkansas, I kept thinking about how can we do that kind of work here, but in a way that makes sense in our community. I mean, the community I was working in was majority Black, and it was a different world. And I was kept thinking, like, how do I come back to the place I'm from, but do work that helps bring people together and helps understand history more deeply? And what resources do we have that might not look like major resources on the surface, but really can be utilized for the community? And so I just learned. I mean, I consider him, my biggest mentor, and still keep in touch with him as often as I can.
Podcast guest, I feel.
Yes, please. Yes. Michael will be amazing. And I'd actually love to hear it because they've had a lot of stuff happen in the last 2 years. I've been following kind of online. And so I'd be super curious to know all the details behind that, because I just know bits and pieces.
You would be, we should try and set that up, and you would be more than welcome to sit in. I do even Zoom style. I do multiple person. I do 3-person podcasts quite a bit. I've had people just be doing a podcast with somebody's best friend from New York, and he's in LA, and the guy in LA is like, I'm just going to log on. I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to listen and watch. Right. So, but I told Marie with a couple of people, she suggested, I was like, hey, let's see if we can't set this up and you can be on and we can kind of guide the conversation together, because we'll have different questions and get the most out of it. But I'm always looking, like, I'll tell you, Johnny Sane was such a good recommendation.
Yeah, he's so great.
Right?
I know.
That was awesome.
Yeah. I love Johnny.
I guess up in Yellowstone now. I've been keeping up with him posting, or was.
In Yellowstone. I saw he had a fishing picture yesterday. So he's out hunting. Me and him and Christine and Brian, we trade. We provide a lot of vegetables and they give us deer meat. We got a nice little swap going on.
See, yeah, okay, yes. There you go. Fantastic. He was such a great guest. I want to have him back on. I've let some time pass and get him to come back on. I had a lot of positive feedback about that episode as well from different people locally, particularly. But it was a good one.
I listened to that one. I was gardening. I had it on the phone and was listening to it while I was gardening. It was good. Yeah.
Yes. But that, I will say, just like with this conversation we're having, I think I kind of mentioned this to you when we were messaging back and forth. This is a resource. This is a database of conversations like these with, like, I've gained empathy from just being on this call, right? It's like, oh man, I never thought about the ESL issue barrier with that stuff we were talking about earlier. Like, and now it just broadens my whole take on it, back to school and virtual learning and everything that's going on right now. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, totally.
yes. um, so how did you, so you kind of mentioned a little bit of your education, but like when I did meet you, whether that was, I think that was when you were adjuncting, right? I think I was an undergraduate and you were adjuncting.
Mm-hmm.
You were a folklorist,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Which you're the only person like that I've ever, it's just you run into very few philosophers and you run into fewer folklorists.
We're out
Which
there.
is fascinating. Yes. How did you get to be one though? That is such a fascinating topic for me, and one thing that has always interested me about your interests.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, well, I stumbled into it. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think I kind of grew up as one, although I wouldn't know to call it that as a kid. You know what I mean? Like I was raised. So to back up, like folklore is the study of basically like the people, human traditions, how things are passed down through generations. That's an oversimplification, and some of my teachers probably get on to me for being so oversimplified. But that's a general way to look at it. And a lot of people think it's just studying old timey things, but it can be. It can be more modern things. But yeah, I grew up. I was an only child. My grandma lived with me, lived with us. I was by far the youngest person in my family, like by far, you know what I mean? So like I had cousins and stuff like that, but my cousins were older. I was always the youngest one around. So I just grew up with old people, quite honestly. And, I grew up with stories, and my parents had me kind of late in life for that time period. It's more common now, but my dad was in his late 30s. My mom was in her early 30s. And, in the 70s, that wasn't super common. So I just was always around like a lot of older people. And my dad is a historian in his own way, and he knows all the history around here, and he knows all the stories. And so I just kind of grew up with that being like my reality, and didn't think much about it. And when I went to school, I was undergrad, thought I wanted to be an English professor because I loved literature and all that stuff. But then I had a history class, and we had to do primary research, and I discovered oral history, like going out and interviewing people. And I was like, this is what I want to do with my life. Like I was like, this is it, going out and talking to people and hearing old stories and stuff like that. So I did that for a while, and then heard about other folklorists and stuff, and got into music and things like that. But then I stumbled into a job at public radio, which is amazing to me to this day because I was young and a little naive, but I kind of walked into the station and was like, I like oral histories. Will you hire me? I mean, that's essentially what I said, which like, I'm glad I was bold enough to do that. I don't know if I'd pull it off now, and they did. That was even weirder. They did. And so I worked as basically a reporter, but doing oral history type stuff for a couple of years. And then I loved working in public radio, but one of the things when you're doing like kind of more journalistic work is you jump very quickly from one topic to another. You don't really get to hone in. Like I was thinking about Marie and how she's honed in on one time period and just knows that time period intimately. As a journalist, you just kind of have to like, you cover this and then you cover that. And I just thought, this is not really for me. I really want to know, I really want to dig in more, and I want to be more involved in my community, not just like reporting on it, but actually doing some of the work. And so to make a really long story short, I found the program at Western Kentucky, graduate program, and excuse me, and applied for that, and wound up going to school there. So it's kind of like
That's where you got
like
your undergrad, was Western Kentucky?
I got my undergrad at UCA.
Okay. Yeah. You mentioned that earlier. I didn't know if that's where you decided to go or what.
Yeah.
Okay. So what did you do after Western Kentucky?
Well, that's kind of how I wound up back here. Like my intention had been to, to go on and use my degree, and was starting to get ready to apply for some stuff, and my mom got diagnosed with terminal cancer. Um, well, um, I think it's important to share these stories. It's not, she died about 10 years ago. It's not hard for me to talk about. And I like to share them because I do think a lot of times people have misconceptions about how you get from point A to point B. So, in real life, has other plans sometimes for you. And so for me, I was getting ready to take my final exams when I found out my mom was dying. And so the day I took my final exam was like the day she was supposed to go in for a full mastectomy, but then they decided not to do it because they realized the cancer was so advanced, there was no point in doing the surgery. So that was like what was happening the day I was taking my final exams. And I was going to drop out and go back home and help take care of my mom. And my mom was, because I knew time was limited. And my mom was like, no one in our family had ever gotten a master's degree. And my mom was like, no, you are not coming home. You are finishing that degree. Like, you have gotten this far. I will make it, or whatever. And she did, and she managed to come to my graduation. She was, we had to get a wheelchair and bring her to the front and stuff, but she made it to my graduation. And then, like 3 days after that, we just threw everything in a U-Haul and came back to Arkansas. And so, yeah, so, and another thing, that's like just being real about my experiences is I went from, I had graduated at the top of my class and had won awards and stuff like that. And the next thing I knew, uh, I was totally broke. My mom was dying, and I was unexpectedly pregnant with twins.
Oh
So
man.
happily unexpectedly pregnant with twins, but certainly not what we were going for. So, like it kind of was like I thought life was going to go a certain way. And, and then my dad got diagnosed with cancer. So my mom had just died. I was having children. Brian worked the night shift. We were incredibly broke. And then my dad got diagnosed with cancer. He lived. Thank goodness he's still alive today. So for several years, really for about 4 years, I went through a series of just trying to figure out how to function, honestly. I mean, it was very difficult, very, very, very difficult. Very beautiful because we were having our children and we were so excited, but twins are really hard. Um, I didn't have any help. Brian was working the night shift. My mom had just died, and my dad was horribly ill. So, you know, but, I laugh and joke about it now because I joke about when people like, what makes you qualified to, run an organization? And I'm like, I took care of twins by myself while I was highly depressed and my dad was sick and my mom had just died. So like, you can't scare me. So I kind of joke about it now because I think, it really changed, and it really helped me see what difficulty can be. And it also helped me see like, you know, um, how to find the beauty in things when they're hard. And so like, I learned a lot about who I am and who I want to be and stuff like that. And but yeah, so when I met you, I was working all kinds of odd jobs, you know what I mean? Just trying to figure out how to what to do. So I adjunct for a while. I did oral history transcription work for a while. I wrote for the newspaper, just kind of hodgepodged jobs together so I could stay home with the kids, but still bring in a little bit of money. and and was working on the McElroy House. So it's kind of a series of you know just trying to figure it all out. And but my kids are my sons are almost 11 now, and life is a lot easier now than it was
Yeah.
then.
Hey, I'm having an idea and I want to run it by you, see what you think about it. So I have a blog for the podcast now.
Oh, cool.
I just got it set up. If you ever want to write for it, any topic, it does not have to be about martial arts or anything. I will do some topics about that, but if you would ever like to if you'd ever like to contribute in any way, though, we can work out anything on that. I can pay you to contribute or trade memberships to whatever you want to do.
Fun. Yeah,
But I want it to be like the podcast, right? I don't want to be like, listen to what I have to say about everything.
Right.
Anyway, but I mean, I get to talk plenty, and I get to put my ideas out there in a variety of ways, and even in these conversations. But I think that would be awesome. I've thought about that quite a bit. I've got some different people that I picked up my first sponsor for the podcast.
Oh, congratulations! That's awesome.
It's a wedding ring.
What is
This is not one of the rings, but it's this ring called Chaos, and they're the silicone rings, but they're like a jiu-jitsu belts.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
So there's my jiu-jitsu sponsor for the podcast, right? But
Nice.
we're going to start doing them for people when we give them a new belt in jiu-jitsu. If they're married, we're going to give them a ring. And these, like this ring, I've had a few of these, whatever this brand is, some like kind of 1 in a million brand or something, there's just like tons of them. But the other brand is like made for working out. It's made to like, you could lift weights with it or whatever. And it's not supposed to.
Cool. That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's kind of the evolution that I've made it to with the podcast is I'm trying to branch out more with other people like myself. I've had a few podcasters on recently, and I love having local people from the community like yourself or Johnny Sane or whoever it is. Different people from across the state have come on. It's just been such a great undertaking. But if you ever have anything that you're passionate about and you would like to write about, keep that in mind.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thanks.
So you did live in Little Rock for a while before moving back here. When did you officially move back to the Yale County, I guess?
It's been 3 years now. I guess 3 years. Yeah, because Pearlie's 6 and she was about 3, almost 4, I think, when we moved back. Yeah. So it's been 2.5, something like that. I know we moved back. Well, it's probably been 3 years this year because I know it was August when we moved. Because I remember it was like a surprisingly cool August. And I remember feeling so grateful because we were moving and it was August and it wasn't too bad. So yeah, it must have been 3 years.
This July has been grueling. Am I right? Wow. The humidity. Oh man. Yeah. Which brings me to the last thing I would like to touch base on. Maybe you're the only person I know who was ready for the pandemic. Right? Like, I mean, somebody I personally know that had it in line, like maybe all this just stops, which it kind of did in many ways, but you were good probably. I mean, at least you had to have some peace of mind. And is that why people say they have a plan, but I'm telling you right now, Corey and I did not have that plan.
Mm-hmm.
We were able to adapt and overcome, but oh no, we didn't plan for that. Like there was no plan for that. But with some ways that you have I know that you've invested in living your life, and that's what I talked with Brian a lot about when he came on the podcast is, would you say that what's going on right now is kind of a fear of that, or not necessarily fear, but an awareness of that is what kind of led you to some of your lifestyle these days?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a combination of, the folklore work. I mean, I think, I'm really interested in like gardening and, kind of like living closer to the land. And I think that, in our culture and everything, we've really gotten disconnected and people don't realize, you know, like food supply chains, they're not
Fragile.
perfect. They're very fragile. I don't think people realize how fragile they are, and medicine supply chains and all that. And, I think part of that was just, you know, uh, always kind of really being, as a kid, one of my biggest dreams was to live out in the country with like, a small farm and stuff like that. We used to come out where I live now. We used to come out and visit my relatives, and I always just admired it and thought it was so amazing, and kind of always wanted to live like that. But like, yeah, I think part of it, and then I also think, just honestly, with everything that happened with my mom, when my mom died and my dad got sick, and we were having two young children and couldn't figure out how we were going to afford groceries. um, I realized I had like an experience where I realized the bottom can drop out of anything at any time. Like that is just the reality of life, and I think logically everybody knows that. But like when you experience it on some level, it transforms you. You know what I mean? Like you're like, no, it really can, like legitimately can. And so I think, when things were happening with the pandemic, like, I mean, I was aware of the fact that different people have been thinking that there was the possibility of a pandemic for a long time, because pandemics can be cyclical, and the flu, I mean, it's not like this is a new thing. This happens in human history all the time, which is sort of funny to me when people get really conspiracy theory about it. It's like, this is not the first time this has happened. This is like a hallmark of history. It will happen again and again and again.
The buzzword
And
is unprecedented, which I
yeah,
think is a false spin on
it's very,
the thing I bring up repeatedly. And Mitch Lerner, he's a historian that came on, is he's like, it talked about there being an anti-mask league during the Spanish flu pandemic. Does that sound familiar?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the reason people should study history, is like there's really nothing that's unprecedented in a lot of ways if you study history. I mean, we just cycle through, stuff all the time. But yeah, I think, I mean, I jokingly call it prepping, but part of it is like a lot of people think I'm like really worried or that I'm miserable, or, because I think about stuff like this, but it's not. I actually really enjoy like the act of, growing my own food. It gives me a lot of peace. Um, I really like for my kids to learn how to do that. Um, so it's actually not like a miserable thing. It's actually, but so I wouldn't say I was like totally prepared. I just think I was more, had been living my life in such a way that I was aware that that was a possibility, whether it be a pandemic or, um, a major storm, or, it can be any number of things. And so, like, our modern society is very fragile. And I think that we don't think of it as being as fragile as it is. And so, um, I think we should all be a little bit more self sufficient in that sense, because it's really naive to think that everything will just flow along like normal. I feel like that's super naive. So, but I also don't think we should be like freaking out all the time, because that brings its own kind of like problems or whatever. But there's something to be said about growing your own food and getting closer to that. And for me, it's honestly, it's like a spiritual practice as well. It's like being able to work with the dirt and grow food and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I remember when everything started coming out, and I remember like early on, I was like, went to the store and bought like a bunch of stuff. Like I don't hoard. I don't believe in hoarding, because that's bad. That can be really problematic. But I went and got what I thought we would need. And then by the time like they actually started closing stuff down, I was like, yeah, we're good. Like,
No joke. I had a thought. It had been a few weeks in, and I guess I just saw you post something maybe on social, or like something unrelated, like you were commenting on some other
Mhm.
societal collapsing events going on or something. And I was like, oh, they're fine. Like, that was my thought. I was like, they're going to be fine. But that's just, and Great. I mean, I know that you guys, does what you do with the community market, is there any sort of an online feature to that, or was there?
Not in Dardanelle, and I'm not selling at the market right now just because
That's why,
it's
yeah, that's why I asked. I wondered.
yeah. But the rest of the one has an online, and some of the people who vend at the Dardanelle market also vend at the rest of the one through the Episcopal Church. It's and I'm blanking on the name, even though I know what it is right now. But yeah, but there's definitely and that's something I always tell people and encourage people to support local growers because they are the ones that will help when there are food supply breakdowns. Is those are going to be the folks that are going to feed us, and so if you're able to afford to pay a little more to pay local farmers, it's a literal investment in the community. You know what I mean? It literally is an investment in the community. And so we don't sell a lot of our stuff. We mostly just grow for ourselves, but there's a lot of folks out there who do sell and highly, highly think that we should support them more. I'd love to see us do more of that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
One last question is a mom, and where we are at with the pandemic, do you have any thoughts or concerns about resuming classes for K-12?
Oh man. Yes. Um, I have mixed feelings on a lot of it. I'll tell you what we've decided for us. And I think every parent has to make, everybody's life looks really different. So I think people have to figure out what works for them. And we're really lucky. I mean, I think that's the other thing is a lot of people may want to choose virtual schooling and may not be able to do it because of work or internet I mean, there's so many layers there, and we're super lucky. But for us, we decided to do virtual um, for a couple of reasons. Brian already works from home. Um, we have acreage, so we're in no, our kids are not cooped up and they're not bored. You know what I mean? But again, we're very lucky. But the biggest deciding factor, I think, for us was one of the whole reasons that we relocated and moved back was for me to be close to my dad, who's 80 and who has a lot of health problems. And so I did not feel like I could send them back and forth to school all the time and then also back and forth to my dad's. I felt like I couldn't do that. And he didn't feel comfortable with that. And
Well, he got a really bad flu a couple years ago, if I'm not mistaken, right?
he almost died from complication from the flu 2 years ago. And again, that was another reason I think I was so prepped for the pandemic, honestly, is because um, I watched my dad get pneumonia and almost die from the flu, and I mean, it was bad. It was scary. I mean, I really thought we were going to lose him there for a while when he was in the hospital. And so, he's beat cancer twice, but he's 80 something years old and he's got heart problems. And when you get respiratory problems and you have heart problems, that is a bad like combination. So, I thought like we couldn't keep, and I'm an only child, and there's no backup caregiver for him. You know what I mean? There's no backup family to come in and help. So I felt like we couldn't have them going back and forth and then also be there for my dad. And so that was the decision that we made. But part of that is we're really lucky. We do have some internet access. It's limited and we'll have to be careful, but we do have it. Brian, works from home and we have room. But I really feel for families who don't, who maybe want to make those decisions but can't because of jobs. I mean, I just feel like it is a no-win situation for so many people. And I feel like it's really exposing the divides that we already have in terms of our community, in terms of haves and have-nots. I mean, it is just exposing that so big. And, and then I think we've got, people who are really don't understand the science. And I know the science is always changing. That's true. But the actual like credited science is like changing a little bit, but it's not changing hugely. I mean, there's everybody's pretty much agreeing on how you bring down the numbers, and they've effectively done that in other countries. Like Germany's going back to school now, because they followed a lot of safety precautions, and they're going back to school, and there's still cases, but it's not nearly as bad as it is here. And I think, that's because they had a very good, I mean, I'm sure it was imperfect, but they've been able to address it and curtail the huge numbers and been able to bring back some safety. And so I hope we can do that here. But I don't know. I just really feel for the teachers because I feel like they're in an impossible situation. I feel like the janitors are in I feel like everybody's in an impossible situation. And I feel like we don't have adequate leadership at the national level to deal with this. And so I think it's just showing all these divides. And so I guess as a community member in a place where a lot of people think it still is a scam or a hoax or whatever, I just think we have to really figure out how to come together as a community and help each other, because we're not going to get support elsewhere, so we have to figure out how to do it together. And so I just feel like I went to a meeting the other night at the Dardanelle School District, and I love what our principal said. She was like, we just have to give each other a lot of grace right now and a lot of
I
patience.
saw that post you made.
Because nobody really knows what the right thing is. And I mean, I think there's a lot to be said for for some kids, being in school is the safest place for them, even during a pandemic. And I think that, is so sad, but also so true. So there's just I think if nothing else, it's exposing the problems that we already had in our community. It's just like shining a spotlight on them, and so it's just so much bigger than just the pandemic. And, we have to kind of figure out ways to share resources and get creative. And I think in times like this, people want to kind of attack other people, and that's not useful or helpful. And so, and it just hurts us more. So I think, yeah. So I don't know. I feel like every family has to do what's right for them, but I feel like it's just a very difficult situation, and there's no easy way out. And I think in 20 years, we'll all be able to look back and be like, well, we should have done this, 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 and this. But, right now, I think there's just a lot of confusion, and I wish they would postpone opening. But I don't think that that's a cure-all, because in postponing opening, there are other problems that come out of that. So I think it's just, yeah. But if nothing else, we have to give safe PPE to the teachers. I think we should pay the teachers and the janitors more. I mean, there's a ton of things I think we should be doing to offset the risks that are there. I think all the time we talk about how much we respect our teachers, but we don't really show it with our actions through funding or through resources. And I think we need to really get our act together on that. So, yeah, I could ramble on and on about that, but I will say, in terms of if parents are struggling and they want to have resources with the River Valley Adult Learning Alliance, we'll have we're trying to build resources, so that's one place that we can help. They won't be huge, and we don't have a ton of money, but if people want to work with us, that would be great.
Yeah. All right, Meredith. Well, this has been a great talk. It was good to see you. And I would say, just based off what I know, and you are somebody that I think makes a difference in the local community. So keep doing what you're doing. All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you
have
for
a great day. Yeah.
You
I'll talk to you soon. Okay.
Okay.
See ya.
Bye.